we would like to welcome you to the Strategies for Succession Planning and Sustained Business Profitability for Small Business session. I will now turn the microphone over to our presenter.
Good morning. My name is Icy Barton, and I'd like to welcome you to my presentation on strategies for succession planning and sustained business profitability for small business. I am part of the doctoral program, and I'm working towards earning my DBA, Doctor of Business Administration. I'd like to also thank my chair, Dr. Matthew Knight, for his support in bringing me to this point. Before we begin, many people have asked, why did I choose this topic? There are several reasons, but one in particular is that I noticed that in small businesses, many businesses fail or they cease after someone passes away. I had a friend who had built a multi-million-dollar business, and unfortunately, when she was diagnosed with a terminal illness, did not have anyone in place to take over her business. And while she had spent 30 years of building that business, once she passed away, that business passed away with her. And so in thinking about what could I do that may make a difference, this is where my topic came. Next slide. The Small Business Administration defines a small business based on the industry as a sole proprietorship, a privately owned corporation, or a partnership with a maximum of 500 employees or a maximum of 1,500 employees having less revenue than larger businesses. Small business owners represent 99.7% of all U.S. businesses, employing half of the private sector employees. A succession plan is a written, detailed set of steps of how the business will continue in case of resignation, death, or removal of leaders in an organization, including the development and promotion of employees. The purpose of a succession plan in an organization is to outline the proper steps to fulfill its mission, vision, and selection of qualified human capital to stay in business. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, baby boomers, individuals born between 1946 and 1964, were the largest segment of the workforce until the millennials surpassed them in 2016. Based on the 2020 census, the number of baby boomers 65 or older will exceed 73 million by the end of 2030. Small business owners will need a succession plan to help prevent negative impact to their businesses as baby boomers exit the workforce. Problem. Baby boomers are retiring rapidly and vacating prominent small business positions, leaving no one to replace them. By 2033, 70% of privately owned small businesses in the United States with a total value of $10 trillion will experience the highest intergenerational transfer of wealth in U.S. history, according to the Small Business Administration. The general business problem is, without a succession plan, a small business may eventually fail or cease operating with the death or retirement of the small business owner. The specific business problem is some business owners lack strategies to develop an effective succession plan to sustain business profitability for the next generation of owners. Purpose. The purpose of this qualitative multiple case study is to explore strategies small business owners use to develop an effective succession plan to sustain business profitability for the next generation of owners. I collected data by interviewing 7 small-sized business owners in the Washington, Baltimore area who have been in business for more than 5 years and implemented a successful succession plan for transitioning their business to a second or third generation owner and sustain profitability. The implications of positive social change include revenue for the business that may lead to certain job opportunities and improvement of the livelihood of communities, citizens, and family. And so my focus is, next slide, please. No, stay right there, I'm sorry. The focus is to explore strategies small business owners use to develop an effective succession plan to sustain business profitability for the next generation of owners. And far as the business impact, I wanted to identify how business owners implemented a succession plan for transitioning the business to a second or third generation owner and sustain profitability. And then I wanted to look at the social impact, increase business revenue to create job opportunities and improve livelihoods of community citizens and families. The research question is, what strategies do small business owners use to develop an effective succession plan to sustain business profitability for the next generation of owners? Through the lens of organizational learning theory and transformational leadership theory is where my conceptual framework begins. The composite conceptual underpinning for this study is Aricus and Scrone's organizational learning theory and Burns' transformational learning theory. Performance problems typically occur when members of an organization are operating in unfamiliar areas of the business, including a small business operating during tactic knowledge transfer. This is an unfamiliar context and risking failure instead of continued success. To avoid such performance problem issues, the members of an organization should undertake an inquiry to allow learning to occur among members of the transition team. Based on the organizational learning theory, there are 3 essential stages that arise: acquiring relevant data, interpretation of relevant data, and adaptation of relevant data. Members of the organization take the initiative for making strategic decisions, establishing derivative goals, and learning indicators from actual data. Interpretation of the data occurs when members of the organization engage in comparing results to update learning of the organization, acting upon the data to do what is best for the organization, and moving into the 3rd stage, which is the adaptation of relevant data. The research of tactic knowledge during succession planning is critical. Previous owners pass on tactic information to the incoming owners to help keep the business operating successfully. The transfer or succession of leadership should be transformational within a company if successfully implemented. Burns developed the transformation leadership theory and used the theory to explain leadership based upon the premise that leaders can inspire followers to change expectations, perceptions, and motivations to work toward common goals. Burns identified these vital constructs underlying the theory: idolized aptitudes, idolized behaviors, intellectual stimulations, inspirational motivation, and individualized considerations. Elsler explored how transformational leaders help create and shape organization visions by challenging the status quo. A shared vision is critical for learning organizations because it catalyzes learning and helps maintain focus. Transformational leaders motivate and persuade their followers to accomplish results, improving the leader's capacity. Transformational leadership is known to positively affect followers' work results, efficiency, duty, and work fulfillment. Researchers have confirmed that the transformational leadership theory is strongly identified with organizational leadership. Ashford stated that organizational leadership has a notable effect on the workplace culture. Coordination and correspondence, as well as learning, is reported to be encouraged by a social connection. If based on findings from the study that they are relevant, I will use the lenses of transformational leadership and organizational learning theory to understand the understanding of the findings. Next slide. Before I get into the relevant scholarship or the literature review, I want to address my participant and sample size. I previously stated that my area, my target population was small business owners in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore metropolitan area in business more than 5 years. They successfully implemented a succession plan for transitioning the business to a second or third generation owner and has sustained profitability. Now, how did I recruit these business owners? They were recruited by telephone and by email. Email consent forms were sent to each small business owner. And as far as my data collection technique, I conducted semi-structured interviews using 9 open-ended questions via Zoom. And I followed interview protocol to mitigate bias, and it was approved by Walden's IRB. I also collected data from public websites about the company, news releases and news article and government databases. My research involved using Walden's library and several different organizations, government agencies, in order to find the information that I needed to collect the data for my proposal and my research. I had to make sure that they were peer reviewed. And so I did a lot of examination. I went through many studies. I reviewed many studies in order to find information and read and then cross-check to make sure that they were peer reviewed. And so with that, I was able to include succession plan, the origin of succession planning, and that took me back to different areas. The majority of the sources that I reviewed were published between 2017 and 2021. I used the following databases: Google Scholar, Business Shore Complete, ABI Inform Collection, Emerald Insight Database, Sage Journals, the European Journal of Business Management, and ProQuest Database. The keywords I used to search the article in these databases included small business succession planning, family-owned business, small business strategies, operation strategies, a small business in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, strategies for small businesses, small business profitability, small business failure, and leadership in small businesses. Much can be learned from exploring the history and the origin of succession planning and by looking at succession planning in the military. Succession planning is traceable to ancient civilization cultures. Oral traditions and recorded or written history of succession planning existed before the 1st century in many nations, including ancient Greece, China, Egypt, and Israel. And so with that, I found many things with transformational leadership, as well as organizational learning theory, and thus was the reason why I chose those 2 conceptual theories to base my study on. Next slide, please. And I am now in the phase, I just completed my interviews, and I'm waiting on one more person, one more small business owner to return member checking to me. And so far, I have found that there are emerging themes that I will present in my final study of my findings. And so in comparing those things, there are a lot of things that have come up I'm excited about, and I would love to share with you today some of those things. However, because my study is not yet completed, I will not be doing that. I would like to say that for the end and hope you will go back and read the completed study that I will present when I am finished. And so let's talk about, again, my procedures. I did address that I used open-ended questions. I originally started out with approximately 15 questions and was able to narrow down those questions to 9 questions. And then as far as the data analysis, which I will be moving into, I will be using Navivo 12. And with Navivo 12, I will be using that to help me go through the data, to help me code. I will manually do it as well as use Navivo 12 just to check to see if we come up with the same things. That's one of the things that I recommend, that when you're doing your study, that you know how to manually code as well as using the software. And I am interested to see what happens with both. And based on what I've done so far, I should come up with the same themes that the Navivo 12 should come up with. And so, and with my participants, as I stated, they came, I looked for 7 business owners between the Washington and Baltimore, DC, Baltimore, Maryland corridor. This was probably the easiest part of my study, though I was warned that it would be the most challenging part. And why I say it was easy is because I used the resources that were available to me in my professional organizations, such as LinkedIn. I am a part of Toastmasters International. And so I used my connections as well as business owners that I knew and was able to approach them. And then last but not least, in interviewing some of the business owners, asking them if they knew another small business owner, I was able to obtain 2 more business interviews as a result of just asking that question of the owners who originally said yes. And so that part was the easiest. I'm not saying that it would be for somebody else. However, living in the Washington, DC, Baltimore, Maryland corridor, there are lots of small businesses that I was able to choose from. And my small businesses come from many different businesses, but they all had the same type of goals and themes that have come up since I have interviewed them. And so with the social change, Walden is very big on the social change implications. And so mine is that this study will increase revenue for businesses that may lead to the creation of job opportunities in their communities. Also by using HR strategies, small businesses can affect as well as create social change by operating stable businesses and developing local economies for individuals and their communities and reducing the failure of businesses. Next slide, please. Here are my references that you'll be able to access for what I've talked about. Next slide, please. And so I'd like to thank each and every person that took the time to come to my presentation, and I will be more than happy to address your questions and answer anything that I can for you today.
Thank you so much, Icy. I have enabled the ability for all of you participants to come off of mute and or share your video for anyone who has a question or would like to engage in some dialogue with Icy Barton about this presentation. Of course, you're also able to type questions or comments in the chat. Do we have any questions? I see it looks like Valentine is joining us and has a question about, could you discuss your literature review?
Yes, I will be more than happy to discuss my literature review. My literature review started with the history of succession planning. I felt that it was important to lay the foundation. Succession planning was not something that was just developed in the 21st century. The succession planning went back before the beginnings of times, and it's traceable to ancient civilizations. And far as it being recorded, it existed before our first century. I also looked at succession planning in the military. Being a retired member of the military, I was able to watch and live succession planning. The military, the United States military, let me preference that, has one of the most successful succession plans in place as far as an organization is concerned. There is not all the guesswork is taken out of who's in charge. If that person falls, who will then take over in the United States military. And the military is consistently developing leaders from the time that whether they enlist or they attend the reserve officer training or attend one of our service academies. Succession planning is a way of life in the military. I also looked at other countries, far as their governments and how succession planning related to the United States government. Here in the United States, we have an executive branch, we have a legislative branch, and we have a judicial branch of government. The executive branch is the head as far as running the country, and that is the president of the United States. There is a succession plan in place for if something should happen to the president. There is a succession plan in our House of Representatives, as well as in the Senate. There is succession for the leadership that's in place, as well as succession if a member should die or resign, which then goes back to the people of the states to vote or to the governor to appoint until an election can be held. And then with our judicial, there is how we select our Supreme Court justices. I looked at more than 20 different countries, and those different countries, of how those countries were run in the succession planning. And I found that there were absolute dictatorships, absolute monarchies, as well as a mixture of monarchies, as well as a democratic society as that is concerned. I also took a look at religious succession planning. I went back and looked at specifically the Catholic Church. There is a succession plan. You have the Pope, you have the cardinals, you have archbishops, bishops, then the priests. And also, as far as the Catholic Church was concerned, where women were concerned, where they stood and where succession did not exist. I then looked at corporate America, and there were some Fortune 500 companies that I looked at that had successful succession plans in place, as well as I looked at businesses that industries as a whole, where I found that there were succession plans where successions had successfully taken place within small businesses. One of those industries that I found in my research was in the funeral businesses. Many funeral businesses were run by families, and many of those businesses are in their second and third generation. It was not my desire to explore small businesses in the funeral industry. I want it to be broad because there are so many different businesses out there. And so in doing that, I looked at family-owned businesses, small businesses, and so my literature just took me to so many different things, and I did not just concentrate in the United States. I looked at succession planning in other countries to see how small businesses either succeed or failed. And so my literature review was very extensive in that. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Icy. I do see Valentine has another question about asking if you could share your research alignment. What is your definition of small business?
Before I began this study, my definition of a small business was a mom and pop organization. That was what I could visibly see. And it wasn't until I became older and realized that what I perhaps thought was a large business really was not a large business. And looking at what the definition of the Small Business Administration defines as a small business. And so based on that, I have now, as far as what my definition is, a small business would be, to me, a business that one has first a mission statement, a vision statement, and an exit strategy. That exit strategy may be to brand their business, to sell it, or to develop a succession plan where they can pass it on to an employee to run the business for them and their family and establish a legacy, or to pass it on to a family member. So my definition of a small business would be versus an entrepreneur that's in business and just making money, and when they stop working, the business will cease. But a small business, a successful one, is one that has that mission statement, vision statement, an exit strategy. And it's not etched in stone, because as businesses change, you have to be adaptable to change. And every small business owner, just like your large corporations, need to know their need to have a SWOT plan, their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and their threats from other companies that are doing what they're doing, or if they're going to enter into business, that they've done a great study to know that if their business is something that's really needed.
I see there's one
I
additional
see another
follow-up question.
Any consideration then of business size as described by the Federal Industry Code or number of employees? Well, in speaking from as an American and here in the United States, operating a business here in the United States, you do have a lot of regulations that you do have to follow. And so the Small Business Administration, which is a government entity, has defined what a small business is. And it's okay if you grow and become a large business, but that small business is defined by the number of people that you have, which I think is a great thing, as well as the amount of revenue that a business is generating. That allows corporations to operate and stay in their lane, and as well as an opportunity for the small business owner. If the small business owner was told, in order for you to have a business, you had to have 10,000 employees, where their business may not mandate that, that would be a lot of problems. I think that the guidelines and regulations that we have for small, what constitutes a small business, also keeps, especially here in the United States, it keeps our job market open with jobs for people to be gainfully employed. At the beginning, I stated that according to the Small Business Administration, that small businesses provide 99.7% of the jobs that are here in the United States. And so small businesses are critical.
Thank you, Icy. We do also have a question in the chat from, I hope I'm not mispronouncing it, Shikes Gray L. Says, good morning. Great information, Icy. How do you see small businesses in communities that are not aware of succession planning obtaining knowledge of such a plan to prepare for a succession plan? i.e., today is the first time I have learned of a succession plan and what it is. How do we bring awareness with hopes of deterring the issues you brought awareness to in your problem statement?
Thank you so much for your question. The first time I heard about succession planning was when I was an HR manager at a major Fortune 500 company. I never heard about succession planning. And so that was new to me, far as that there was a whole department like talent management and how people were selected to be developed. And so, because when I went to school, I was told, do well, someone will notice you and you'll get promoted. And then I went to corporate America, and that was not true. And so, as I mentioned, what was personal for me is when a dear friend of mine passed away, and no one in her family, her husband, her children could not take over the business, and there was no employees. Education is key. And the Small Business Administration offers many classes. Part of my research included going to succession planning workshops that the Small Business Administration was offering to small business owners in the Washington, D.C. area. However, with Washington, D.C. being a place with an abundance of small businesses, there were only about maybe 12 or 15 business owners that were there, and some sent their secretaries to get the information. I believe that we have to first start by educating. When you look at literature that's put out from the Small Business Administration or from businesses, we hear about having a mission statement and a vision statement. We do not hear about an exit strategy. And so before you open your business, you need to know how you're going to close your business. Some people start small businesses only to develop them to a certain point, brand that business, and then sell that business. And that's great. But if you don't know how to do that, or if you've been running your business, every morning when I get in my car, I see a sign that says, "Thank you for 56 years." And I wondered, had I had an opportunity to talk to that business owner, maybe he would have sold that business, and that business that had been in my community for 56 years would have continued. He sold the business to a developer who built apartment buildings, which I think that it was a viable business that could have continued on had he had a succession plan in place. Part of that, business owners have to constantly educate themselves. You may know your business, but you have to, it's a continuing education process. I know some people reach out to consultants, and that's great if you're already in your business and you're thriving and you want to keep your business successful. And you may need to bring in someone from the outside that has had a successful business, that has sold that business, or has done far as succession planning. I know that in the Small Business Administration, they have the SCORE, which is a group of retired executives that have been in Fortune 500 companies, also who have had their own businesses, who can share their knowledge and help the current business owner avoid missteps that people make. Many small businesses, and there's nothing wrong, want to make a profit, and I agree with that. But before you open up, you need to make sure that you have not only that mission statement, that vision statement, but that exit strategy. And I would add a fourth thing, that you make sure that you cross every T and dot every I, and that you, wherever you are located in the world, that you are operating legally according to the laws of the land of where you're operating your business, so that your business can be successful. And also, with that small business owner, know that someday time will catch up with you and you will become older. You may get sick, or you may unfortunately pass away early. Most people think, well, I'm good because I have an insurance policy, it's going to take care of my family. But what about the employees that have worked faithfully for you? What about the people in your community that is depending on the product that you produce, and the jobs and the monies that then go out into that community? And I believe that it comes by re-educating our small business owners. I'm very passionate about that. I have another question.
Yes, thank you, Icy. I think we have just a couple of minutes left, so Jasmine does have one last question. Is there a sample succession plan format available that you may recommend to small businesses to model?
I would recommend that you go to the Small Business Administration.gov and just type in succession planning. They have a lot of resources that are available. There is not, quote, a plan, a cookie cutter plan, because every business is unique. but that is a great place to start. I would also recommend that you check your local government. Your local government, and especially if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, I know that Prince George's County has the Small Business Administration comes in and they teach about succession planning. It's also done within the District of Columbia, which is Washington, D.C. You can also check on the Small Business Administration to see when they're going to have classes that you may take virtually about succession planning, or reach out to Small Business Administration and ask them, is there someone from the Small Business Administration that can help put together in your community a seminar on succession planning? They have the resources to be able to, if they have to, fly in someone from Washington, D.C., also bring in someone from SCORE. But there's so many things that are out there about succession planning. The hardest part for most business owners is just getting started. And if you take the time to do that and gather those type of resources, no matter how long you choose to stay in business or pass it on, you would have done a great service to the next business owner.
Wonderful. Icy, thank you so much for your awesome presentation. We appreciate everybody's participation and thank you for joining us.